Damn it, just hold still. Kale muttered the words more to the sparking console than the shimmering, vaguely humanoid shape coalesced in the corner of the derelict ship's command center. He wrenched a corroded panel free, grimacing as viscous bioluminescent fluid, thick as honey and smelling faintly of ozone and orchids, oozed onto his glove. He was deep in the guts of the Xylothi cruiser, deeper than any sane scavenger would venture. But the rumors of an intact resonance core, worth the risk. Worth the creepy, silent audience. He'd found her slumped against a nutrient-paste dispenser, inert, her internal light a mere flicker. Looked like a high-status Xylothi, the intricate shifting patterns across her semi-translucent skin suggested nobility or maybe just high maintenance. He nudged her. Nothing. Left her there, assuming she was just another beautiful casualty of whatever downed the ship. But then she'd reinflated, straightened up, and started watching him. Her light pulsed softly now, a pearlescent white swirling with veins of electric blue. No translator signal, no sound, just watching. He risked a glance. Her form was fluid, unsettlingly so. Less solid flesh, more contained energy field given graceful, feminine shape. 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, a head crowned with tendrils that drifted like seaweed in zero-G, each tipped with a tiny, bright spark. Her eyes were large, pools of liquid silver that seemed to absorb the dim emergency lighting. And she was definitely focused on him. He went back to the console, trying to ignore the prickle on his neck. Almost there, you overpriced piece of, a sudden pressure clamped around his wrist. Not painful, but absolute. He froze. Slowly, he turned his head. She was right behind him, close enough that he could feel a strange vibration humming through the contact point, traveling up his arm. Her face was inches from his, those silver eyes searching his. The light within her intensified, shifting to a vibrant violet, the pattern swirling faster. Her grip tightened fractionally. He could see the intricate latticework beneath her skin, a complex network of light and energy. A low thrumming sound started, seemingly emanating from her chest, felt more than heard. It resonated in his bones, making his teeth buzz. Her other hand came up, fingers tipped with the same tiny sparks as her head tendrils, and traced the line of his jaw. The touch was cool, smooth, yet sent a jolt like static electricity through him. He flinched instinctively. Her head tilted, a gesture of curiosity that was unnervingly predatory. The thrumming intensified, morphing into something resembling a purr but deeper, more resonant. Her lips, barely defined lines of shifting light, parted slightly. No words came out, just another wave of that deep vibration washing over him, making his insides feel rearranged. He tried to pull his wrist back. Her grip was like synth steel wrapped in silk. Panic fluttered in his chest, warring with a strange, unwilling fascination. This close, her scent was stronger, ozone, orchids, and something else, something metallic and sweet like charged plasma. She leaned closer still, her forehead nearly touching his. The violet light pulsed, casting his face in alien hues. He felt trapped, pinned by her gaze and that impossible grip, drowning in sensation. Her grip didn't lessen, but the quality of it changed. Less restraint, more tactile exploration. Her thumb brushed over the pulse point on his wrist, and the light within her flickered, shifting from violet to a warm, rose-gold hue. The resonant purring softened, becoming a low, inquisitive hum. Kale swallowed, his throat dry. "Okay," he said, keeping his voice as steady as he could manage. "Look, I don't know what you want, I'm just salvaging. You know, scrap." He gestured vaguely with his free hand towards the sparking console. No threat, just trying to make a credit. Her silver eyes tracked the movement, but her attention snapped back to his face. She tilted her head again, mimicking his earlier gesture, a faint shimmer of amusement in the way the light danced across her features. The tendrils around her head swayed, their tips brushing against his shoulder, sending more tiny shocks through his worn jumpsuit. He felt ridiculously exposed, dissected by her silent scrutiny. He needed a plan, needed leverage. "This ship," he tried again, "it's dead. Whatever power source you're running on won't last forever. I have a ship, small but functional. I can get us somewhere." Her expression, if the subtle shifts of light could be called that, didn't change. She seemed utterly unconcerned with the ship's status or his offer. Her focus remained entirely on him, on the physical connection. Her free hand drifted from his jaw down his neck, pausing over the frantic beat of his pulse beneath the skin. The rose-gold light warmed, intensified. He could feel the heat radiating from her palm even through the fabric. It wasn't burning, just present. A focused warmth that seemed to sink into him. Was this communication, threat assessment, foreplay? With Zalothy, the lines were notoriously blurred. He remembered fragmented pilot chatter about their species, touch-based empaths, resonance bonders, dangerously unpredictable. Nothing concrete, just warnings wrapped in Bartok bravado. She leaned in again, the scent of ozone and orchids filling his senses. The thrumming in her chest deepened, vibrating against his own sternum now. He held his breath, bracing for something. An attack, an energy drain. Instead, her tendrils brushed his cheek, feather-light, sending a cascade of sparks across his vision that wasn't entirely unpleasant. Then she pulled back slightly, her grip on his wrist finally loosening, though not releasing entirely. Her silver eyes held his, and for the first time he thought he saw something other than detached curiosity. Possessiveness. Maybe. Recognition. Unlikely. He was just some scruffy human scavenger caught in her web, but the intensity was undeniable. She tugged his wrist gently, pulling him away from the console, towards the center of the command deck. Resistance felt futile, possibly suicidal. He let himself be led, stumbling slightly on the slick, fluid-coated deck plating. She stopped before a large, throne-like chair that seemed molded from the same bioluminescent material as the ship's walls, currently dark. With another gentle tug, she indicated he should sit. He hesitated. "What are you doing?" Still no verbal response. Just that steady, silver gaze and the insistent pressure on his wrist. He glanced back at the console, the potential salvage, then at the alien woman holding him captive with unnerving calm. Survival instincts warred with the sheer weirdness of the situation. Sitting felt like surrender. Standing felt like defiance she could crush in an instant. He slowly lowered himself into the chair. It molded slightly to his form, surprisingly comfortable. She released his wrist, the sudden absence of her touch leaving his skin tingling. Then she placed her hands on the armrests beside his, leaning over him, effectively pinning him again, her light washing over him. The resonant hum returned, stronger this time, shaking the very chair beneath him. It felt like being inside a giant alien tuning fork. The resonant humming pulsed through him, a physical force that vibrated deep in his bones. Cale gripped the armrests, his knuckles white. Her light, now a swirling mix of rose gold and violet, seemed to intensify with the sound, bathing the command deck in an ethereal glow. He felt scanned, not medically but emotionally, sensorially. Like she was tasting the static charge on his skin, listening to the rhythm of his blood. Her silver eyes never left his. He tried projecting calm, competence, anything other than the rising tide of what the actual hell is happening. It didn't seem to work. A flicker of something, impatience, crossed her features, the light briefly sharpening to an electric blue before softening again. Her tendrils swayed, tracing patterns in the air just above his head. Then one dipped down, its sparkling tip hovering directly over the center of his forehead. He instinctively jerked his head back, pressing deeper into the yielding chair. "Whoa, hey, personal space." The tendril paused, then deliberately, slowly touched his skin right between his eyebrows. It wasn't a shock this time. It was information, a flood of it. Not words, not images exactly, but pure sensory data, the cool, smooth texture of her own skin, the intricate flow of energy within her, a sense of vast, cold emptiness space. Followed by sharp bursts of fear and the jarring impact of the crash, and beneath it all a profound, aching loneliness. It lasted only a second but left him breathless, disoriented. He stared up at her, understanding dawning. This was communication, raw, unfiltered, deeply intimate. She pulled the tendril back, her light softening further, becoming almost purely rose gold. The humming subsided to a gentle thrum. She watched his reaction, her head tilted slightly. "You." Cale started, his voice raspy. "You showed me the crash." A slow blink of those silver eyes, confirmation. "Why?" Another pause. She lifted her hand from the armrest and tentatively touched his cheek again, the gesture lacking its earlier probing quality. It felt questioning, hesitant even. He didn't flinch this time. He met her gaze, trying to process the sensory dump. Fear, loneliness, survival. Basic, universal drives. Was she just trying to make him understand she wasn't a threat? Or was she showing him her vulnerability, seeking what? Help, companionship? He risked reaching up slowly, letting her see his intention, and gently touched the back of her hand where it rested on his cheek. Her skin, or whatever it was, felt cool and incredibly smooth, like polished glass, but yielded slightly under his touch. The moment his fingers made contact, her light flared brightly, a wave of pure gold washing over her form, and the thrumming in her chest spiked into a distinct, resonant chord that vibrated through both of them. It felt like connection, like striking a tuning fork against another. Her eyes widened slightly, the silver irises seeming to expand. He felt an echo of her surprise, a jolt of something pleasant, startlingly pleasant. He quickly pulled his hand back, unnerved by the intensity of the reaction, hers and his own. The golden light faded slightly, the resonant chord softening back into a hum, but the atmosphere had shifted. The initial sense of menace was gone, replaced by a charged curiosity that flowed both ways. She straightened up, moving back a step, giving him space. The possessiveness he'd sensed earlier was still there, but now it felt less like ownership and more like focus. Intense, undivided focus. He watched her, wary but undeniably intrigued. This Zelothi, whoever she was far more complex than just a dangerous alien. She was transmitting emotion, memory, raw sensation through touch, and his touch apparently triggered a significant response in her. He pushed himself up from the chair, testing her reaction. She watched him but didn't move to stop him. He walked back towards the console he'd been working on. "Okay," he said, more to himself than her. "Okay, resonance core can wait." He needed to understand this situation, understand her. He turned back. She hadn't moved, just stood there, glowing softly, watching him with those unnerving, beautiful eyes. "Do you have a name?" He pointed to himself. "Kale," he pointed to her. "You," she tilted her head. The light around her swirled, coalescing into intricate patterns. Then a sound emerged from her, not the resonant hum, but something clearer, melodic. A series of rising and falling tones, complex and beautiful. "Lyra," the ship's emergency translator suddenly crackled, startling them both. The synthesized voice was tinny, damaged. "Designation, Lyra, Zelothi, High Command." Lyra looked towards the sound, then back at Kale, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Lyra, High Command. That explained the regal bearing, at least. Kale leaned against the damaged console, crossing his arms. "Lyra," he repeated, testing the name. It felt strange on his tongue. She watched his mouth as he spoke, then the violet light pulsed briefly within her core before settling back to rose gold. Was she analyzing his speech patterns, learning? "So Lyra, High Command," Kale continued, gesturing around the wrecked bridge. "What happened here? Not exactly standard operating procedure, is it?" Lyra glided closer, her movements unnervingly smooth. She stopped a few feet away, close enough for him to feel that faint warmth radiating from her. She lifted a hand, palm open, fingers slightly curled. An invitation, or a command. He hesitated. That touch, it was potent, addictive almost. But sharing unfiltered consciousness with an alien commander wasn't exactly on his daily to-do list. "Words," Kale said, tapping his own temple. "Translator, can you use it?" Lyra tilted her head, the light around her shifting, concentrating. The ship's translator crackled again. "Interface damaged, biolink partial." Her own voice, when filtered through the translator, was a low, melodic contralto, surprisingly smooth despite the static. "Touch better." She extended her hand again, insistent. He sighed. Curiosity was rapidly overriding caution. "Okay, fine, but easy, all right. Last time was a bit much." He slowly reached out, placing his palm against hers. The connection flared instantly. The warmth, the thrumming resonance, the sense of her presence flooding his senses. This time it wasn't a chaotic memory dump, it was more focused. Images, fragmented but clearer, pursuers, sleek dark ships spitting energy fire, evasive maneuvers through an asteroid field, damage alarms screaming, a desperate FTL jump mistargeted, the jarring crash not just onto the moon but through something, some kind of dimensional membrane, then silence, isolation. Waiting. The images faded, leaving behind the residue of lingering fear and that profound loneliness he'd sensed before, and underneath it all, a fierce determination to survive. He pulled his hand back, breathing a little faster. Pursuers who? Lyra's form shimmered, the light darkening slightly. Korlak slavers, the translator supplied after a moment, her voice tight. Seek Xylothi tech, resonance, procreation matrix. Procreation matrix. That sounded intimate and valuable. No wonder slavers were after her ship. So you're stranded, alone. Lyra's silver eyes met his, a subtle dip of her head. Yes. Why stay on the bridge? Why not try to repair something? Signal for help, she gestured towards the dark, throne-like chair. Command node requires biosignature, mine. She then gestured vaguely outwards towards the dense jungle pressing against the viewport. Atmosphere incompatible, long-term, so she was trapped. Tethered to the dying ship by her biology, unable to survive outside for long, and he was her first contact. Maybe her only hope. Great, just great. He ran a hand through his already messy hair. Look, my ship's small, a two-seater hopper barely space-worthy, not built for Xylothi High Command. Lyra drifted closer again, invading his personal space with deliberate intent. The rose-gold light warmed, swirling with playful hints of violet. She reached out, not with her hand this time, but with one of her head tendrils tracing the collar of his jumpsuit. The tiny sparks danced against his skin. Small ship, the translator echoed, her voice gaining a low, teasing note that sent an unexpected shiver down his spine. Human, resourceful, her silver eyes gleamed. Kale, stay. It wasn't quite a question, not quite a command. It was an expectation, wrapped in that potent, touch-based charm offensive. He felt cornered again, but this time, it wasn't entirely unpleasant. Her proximity, the low hum vibrating between them, the memory of that resonant connection, it was messing with his usually reliable self-preservation instincts. He should be figuring out how to grab the core data and run. Instead, he was considering staying with a stranded, bioluminescent alien commander who communicated via psychic touch and seemed to think he was resourceful. Staying means fixing things, he countered, trying to regain some control. Power, life support, maybe that translator needs parts, tools, my ship. Lyra nodded slowly, the light around her brightening with apparent understanding. She touched his chest, right over his heart. The warmth spread through him, accompanied by that resonant hum. Kale, help Lyra. A pause then, with that teasing undertone again. Lyra, help Kale. He wasn't sure what kind of help she was offering, but the way her light pulsed suggested it wasn't entirely technical. He spent the next cycle wrestling with the ship's systems, Lyra a constant, luminous presence at his side. Sometimes she watched in silence, her light shifting with unreadable thoughts. Other times she'd reach out, brushing his arm, his shoulder, sending jolts of warmth and that peculiar resonant hum through him. Communication remained patchy, the translator sputtered random words, while touch transfers were intense but often ambiguous, heavy with emotion but light on specifics. He learned she was trying to activate a distress beacon keyed to her unique Xylothi resonance, but the ship's power core was failing, unstable. He managed to reroute auxiliary power, coaxing the environmental controls back to a semblance of normalcy on the bridge and stabilizing the translator interface, though it still dropped words. Lyra seemed pleased, her light flaring a brilliant gold when the air recyclers kicked in with a wheeze. She rewarded him with a sustained touch to his forearm that left his skin tingling and his head buzzing pleasantly for minutes afterward. Proximity bred a strange kind of familiarity. He learned the subtle shifts in her bioluminescence, violet for curiosity or focus, rose gold for pleasure or connection, electric blue for annoyance or alarm, a deep indigo when she seemed lost in thought or memory. He learned the cadence of her resonant hum, how it deepened with concentration or softened into something almost like contentment when he managed a small repair. The flirtation, if it could be called that, was constant, woven into her very presence. A brush of her tendrils against his neck as he leaned over a console. The way she'd glide into his path, forcing him to stop, her silver eyes locking with his. The deliberate touches that always seemed to land on pulse points or sensitive skin. Kale found himself responding, despite his ingrained caution. A sarcastic remark would earn him a flare of violet light and a soft, humming chuckle through the translator. A shared moment of frustration over a stubborn relay might lead to her placing a cool hand on his, a silent offering of solidarity, distraction. It was hard to tell, but it always short-circuited his irritation. One evening cycle, as the emergency lights dimmed further, signaling another dip in the failing power core, he found her staring out the main viewport at the overgrown moonscape, bathed in the light of two small, swift moons. Her own light was dim, a melancholic indigo. He approached cautiously. "Something wrong?" She turned slowly, her form shimmering. "Alone," the translator crackled. "Long time," she gestured vaguely. "Crew gone, resonance faded." He understood. The Zalothi relied on that connection, that shared resonance. Being truly alone was probably agonizing for her. He felt a pang of empathy, surprising himself. "You're not alone now," he said softly. Lyra looked at him, her silver eyes searching his face. She drifted closer, the space between them shrinking until he could feel the familiar warmth. "Kale," her hand came up, hovering near his cheek. He didn't pull away. He watched as her fingers, shimmering with soft light, gently cupped his jaw. The contact was electric, but softer this time, less demanding. The resonant hum started, low and intimate, vibrating not just in his bones, but somewhere deeper. Her light shifted, warming back to rose gold, chasing away the indigo shadows. "Stay," she murmured, the word clear even without the translator. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a plea, wrapped in sensation. He found himself leaning into the touch, his own caution dissolving in the warmth, the resonance, the undeniable pull towards this strange, luminous being. He lifted his hand, covering hers where it rested on his cheek. "Okay, Lyra," he breathed. "I'll stay." Her light flared, a brilliant, joyful supernova of gold, and the resonant chord struck between them again, sharp, clear, and deeply satisfying. Just as he leaned in further, drawn by an impulse he wasn't bothering to question anymore, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Behind Lyra, deeper in the shadows near the command throne, another shape coalesced. Identical. Same height, same fluid form, same glowing tendrils. But this one, its light was fainter, hesitant, mostly a pale, shimmering white. It watched them, its silver eyes wide, holding an expression Kale couldn't decipher. Lyra stiffened, her light instantly shifting to a defensive, sharp blue. She pulled her hand away from Kale as if burned, whirling around to face the newcomer. "Not now," the translated word snapped through the quiet bridge, sharp and angry. The second figure flinched, its light dimming further, almost vanishing into the shadows. Kale stared, his mind struggling to process. Two Lyras. Kale's brain felt like it was short-circuiting. Two Lyras. One radiating possessive anger, the other shrinking back like a startled ghost. "What? Who is that?" he managed, pointing a shaky finger towards the shadowed figure. Lyra shot him a look that was pure "stay out of this," her light pulsing a dangerous electric blue. She took a step towards the other figure, her voice low and sharp, the translator struggling to keep up. "Recede, not authorized. Integration incomplete." The second figure, the clone, didn't recede. Instead, she took a hesitant step forward, emerging slightly from the shadows. Her light, though faint, was undeniably her, a pearlescent white with delicate silver tracings, subtly different from Lyra's bolder patterns. Her silver eyes flickered towards Kale, a silent appeal in their depths before snapping back to Lyra. "He stays," the translator crackled, relaying the clone's voice. It was Lyra's voice, but softer, breathier, lacking the commander's sharp edges. "Resonance calls." Lyra's form tightened, shimmering with barely contained fury. "You feel my resonance, Echo, nothing more, Echo," so she had a name, or at least a designation. Echo took another step, her light flaring slightly, gaining a touch of defiant pink. "Feel Kale," she insisted, her gaze darting towards him again. Warmth, curiosity, his resonance. Kale felt pinned between them, the target of an argument he didn't understand, conducted by two identical bioluminescent aliens. Lyra whirled back to face Kale, blocking his view of Echo. Her light blazed, momentarily blinding him. "She is contingency," Lyra spat, the words clipped. "Backup protocol, incomplete, unstable, ignore her." "Ignore her," Kale rubbed his eyes. "She looks pretty damn real to me, and she's talking. What contingency requires a duplicate?" Lyra's blue light flickered, agitation warring with reluctance. Zalothi's survival complex. High command requires safeguards, redundancy. She waved a dismissive hand back towards Echo, who had retreated slightly into the shadows again, watching them intently. She is merely reflection, not sentient, not real. Not real, Echo's voice, thin but clear through the translator, cut through Lyra's explanation. Feel, want. Lyra spun around again. Silence, you are data, pattern, you feel what I allow. Feel him, Echo repeated stubbornly, her faint light pulsing pink again. Kale stepped forward, moving around Lyra so he could see Echo more clearly. She flinched slightly at his approach but held her ground. Up close, the differences were more apparent. Echo's movements were less fluid, more hesitant. Her light patterns were simpler, less dynamic. And her eyes, they held a vulnerability, a nascent awareness that Lyra's confident gaze lacked. She doesn't seem like just data, Lyra, Kale said quietly, his gaze fixed on Echo. Echo's light warmed slightly at his attention, a soft blush of rose creeping into the white. Lyra moved swiftly, positioning herself between them again. Her hand shot out, gripping Kale's arm tightly, pulling his attention back to her. The touch was hot, demanding, the blue light stinging slightly. Kale belongs, resonance is mine, she declared, her voice resonating with possessive power. She interferes, disrupts the bond. What bond? Kale tried to pull his arm away, but her grip was iron. We just met. Connection, Lyra insisted, her silver eyes blazing into his. You feel it, strong. She is interference, static. From behind Lyra, Echo spoke again, her voice trembling slightly but gaining strength. Connection shared, Zalothi way. Lyra stiffened as if struck. That is not for you, you are incomplete. She released Kale abruptly and glided towards Echo, her movements radiating menace. Recede, now. Or be reintegrated. Echo stood her ground, though her light flickered nervously. She looked past Lyra directly at Kale. Want, turn, she stated, the words simple but laden with meaning Kale was only beginning to grasp. To feel, to know Kale. Lyra let out a sound, a sharp, resonant hiss, and lunged towards Echo. Lyra slammed into Echo, not with physical force, but with a wave of dominant, pulsing blue light. Echo staggered back, her own pearlescent glow flickering wildly as if struggling against an overwhelming current. It wasn't a fistfight. It was a battle of wills, waged with resonance and bioluminescence. Echo cried out, a thin, warbling sound amplified slightly by the translator into a pained, static burst. She raised her hands defensively, trying to project her own faint light, a shield against Lyra's assault. Kale reacted instinctively, shoving himself between them. Hey, stop it, both of you, he braced himself, expecting Lyra's anger to turn on him, but she paused, her blue light washing over him, assessing. Echo behind him seemed to steady slightly, her light regaining some consistency. Kale, Lyra's voice was tight, strained. She challenges protocol. She challenges me. She must be contained. She looks scared, not challenging, Kale retorted, keeping himself positioned protectively in front of Echo. He could feel the faint, nervous vibrations emanating from the clone behind him. What did she mean, shared? Turn, Lyra's light flickered again, a sign of internal conflict. Zalothi bonding can involve resonance harmonies, triads, but she is not qualified, she is flawed copy. Her gaze flickered past him to Echo. Dangerous. She asked for a turn, Kale pressed. A turn at what? Talking to me? Lyra averted her gaze, a rare sign of evasion. Understanding you, connecting, it is process, mine, not hers. Echo peeked around Kale's shoulder, her silver eyes wide. Lyra fears, she whispered, the translator catching the soft words. Fears Kale choose. Lyra whirled, her light flaring violet this time, shot through with angry blue sparks. Choose, there is no choice. He connects to me, the prime, you are shadow. Shadow feels, Echo countered, stepping out slightly from behind Kale, her light gaining a surprising firmness, shifting towards a pale but steady rose. Shadow wants. The air crackled with tension, the resonant hum of both Zalothi creating a dissonant chord that set Kale's teeth on edge. He felt like a bone being fought over by two luminous, energy-based wolves. He needed to de-escalate this fast. Okay, look, he said, holding up his hands. Nobody is choosing anyone right now. We're stuck on a dying ship, remember. Slavers out there. We need to work together, not fight over me. He looked from Lyra's furious face to Echo's apprehensive one. Can we just Table the existential clone drama for 5 minutes and focus on survival. Lyra held his gaze, her light slowly softening from angry blue-violet back towards a cooler, more controlled indigo. She clearly didn't like it, but the logic was hard to argue. Survival first. Possessive disputes later. She gave a stiff nod. Fine. Contingency, she addressed Echo curtly. Make yourself useful. Monitor secondary power conduits. Report fluctuations. Do not interface directly with Kale. Echo hesitated, looking at Kale, then at Lyra's unyielding expression. She dipped her head in acknowledgement, her light dimming back to a neutral white, and glided silently towards a flickering auxiliary console on the far side of the bridge. Lyra watched her go, her posture rigid, before turning back to Kale. The anger was banked, but the possessiveness simmered just beneath the surface. She is distraction, Lyra stated flatly. Focus must be repair, beacon. Right, Kale agreed, though his gaze drifted towards Echo's receding back. The image of her standing up to Lyra, stating her desire, stuck with him. She wasn't just a copy, she was becoming something else, something real. He forced his attention back to the main console. Let's check the primary couplings again. If we can stabilize the core flow, even briefly, he trailed off, distracted by a sudden, intense warmth spreading across his back. He turned. Lyra had pressed her palm flat against his spine, right between his shoulder blades. Her light was a deep, pulsing rose gold. Focus here, she murmured, her voice a low thrum through the translator, heavy with suggestion. The touch sent a wave of heat through him, pooling low in his gut. It wasn't informational this time, purely sensual. A deliberate attempt to reclaim his attention, to re-establish her primary claim. He felt Echo glance back at them from across the bridge, a flicker of white light before quickly looking away. Kale stood frozen for a moment, caught in the crossfire of unspoken desires, the heat of Lyra's touch a stark contrast to the image of Echo's vulnerable defiance. This was getting complicated. Fast. The next few shifts were a tense ballet of repairs and simmering conflict. Kale focused on the engineering, trying to ignore the charged atmosphere. Lyra stayed close, her touches becoming more frequent, more insistent, each brush of her hand or tendril a reminder of her claim. A jolt of rose-gold warmth meant to keep his focus solely on her. Echo, meanwhile, worked diligently at her assigned console, her light usually a subdued white. But Kale caught her watching him sometimes, her silver eyes filled with a hesitant curiosity that tugged at something within him. Occasionally, when Lyra was momentarily distracted or recharging in the command throne, Echo would risk a brief interaction. Once, she silently offered him a nutrient-paced packet she'd retrieved, her fingers brushing his as he took it. The contact was fleeting, cool compared to Lyra's heat, but it carried a distinct resonance, a shy flicker of pink light, a faint, questioning hum. Another time, as Kale swore at a stubbornly fused circuit, Echo glided over. Instead of touching him, she pointed a slender, luminous finger at a secondary junction he'd overlooked. Try rerouting, the translator offered softly. He tried it. It worked. Thanks, he said, genuinely grateful. Echo's light warmed slightly. A blush of pale rose spreading across her form. Help Kale, she whispered, echoing Lyra's earlier words but with entirely different intent, before quickly retreating as Lyra stirred. Lyra noticed the interactions, her light flaring blue whenever she caught Echo even looking Kale's way. The arguments became less frequent but more intense, sharp exchanges of resonant energy and clipped, translated words that usually ended with Lyra reasserting her dominance and Echo withdrawing, her light dimming. Kale felt increasingly torn. Lyra's presence was intoxicating, her confidence and possessiveness a potent lure. The physical connection with her was undeniable, a powerful current that promised oblivion. But Echo sparked something different. Protective instincts, yes, but also a growing fascination with her quiet strength, her burgeoning self-awareness, her vulnerability. He saw her struggling for identity, for the right to simply be, and it resonated with his own guarded nature, his own buried longing for genuine connection beyond fleeting intensity. The tension finally snapped during a critical diagnostic on the main beacon transmitter. Kale was deep inside a maintenance crawlspace, surrounded by sparking wires, Lyra relaying readings from the main console. Suddenly, the power fluctuated violently. Alarms blared. Core instability spike. Lyra's voice was sharp through the comm. Kale, get out! He scrambled backwards, but a cascade of failing relays sent showers of sparks raining down. One caught his sleeve, instantly searing through the fabric, burning his skin. He yelled, yanking his arm back. Before Lyra could even react from the console, a flash of white light filled the crawlspace entrance. Echo was there, pushing past sparking conduits without hesitation. She reached him, her cool hands instantly covering the burn. A wave of soothing, pearlescent light flowed from her palms, neutralizing the pain, leaving only a strange, pleasant coolness. The resonant hum emanating from her was soft, steady, focused entirely on healing. "Hold still," she murmured, her actual voice unfiltered by the translator, a surprisingly gentle melody. He stared at her, momentarily stunned by her swift, selfless action. Her silver eyes met his, filled with concern. In that moment there was no calculation, no mimicry, just her, real. Lyra appeared at the entrance, her light a furious blue. "Echo, protocol, stand down." Echo ignored her, keeping her hands pressed firmly against Kale's arm, the soothing resonance flowing steadily. The burning sensation was completely gone. "She helps," Kale said, his voice rough, looking directly at Lyra. "She helped me." Lyra's light pulsed erratically, torn between fury and the undeniable fact that Echo had acted decisively to aid him. Echo finally drew her hands back. The skin on Kale's arm was pink but unbroken, the burn seemingly vanished. She looked from Kale's arm to his face, her light softening to a shy rose. "Kale, okay?" "Yeah," he breathed. "Thanks, Echo." He met her gaze, a silent understanding passing between them, a connection formed not through overwhelming sensation, but through quiet care. Lyra watched them, her form rigid, the blue light slowly receding, replaced by a complex, unreadable indigo. The air thickened with unspoken emotion, the fragile truce shattered by an act of simple kindness. Echo had crossed a line, not by challenging Lyra, but by connecting with Kale in a way Lyra hadn't anticipated, through quiet competence and genuine concern. The dynamic had irrevocably shifted. The confrontation Kale had been dreading arrived sooner than expected. They had managed, through a combination of Kale's improvisation, Lyra's command codes, and Echo's surprisingly adept power regulation, to stabilize the core enough to send a single, focused burst from the distress beacon. It was a long shot, but it was their only shot. As the last echoes of the signal faded into the void, an exhausted silence fell over the bridge. Kale slumped against a console, wiping sweat and grime from his forehead. Lyra stood near the viewport, staring out at the stars, her indigo light contemplative. Echo lingered near the auxiliary controls, her white glow soft and unassuming. Lyra turned, her gaze sweeping over Kale, then settling on Echo with unnerving intensity. "Contingency," she said, her voice amplified by the now fully functional translator, cold and clear. "Your purpose is fulfilled. Stand by for reintegration." Echo flinched, her light flickering violently. "No." Kale pushed himself off the console. "Reintegration, what does that mean?" "She is data," Lyra stated flatly, gliding towards Echo, her light shifting towards a commanding blue. "An imprint no longer necessary, her pattern will be reabsorbed, order restored." "Reabsorbed?" Kale stared in horror. That sounded terrifyingly like erasure. Echo backed away from Lyra, her light flaring a desperate, pleading pink. "Am real, Kale knows." She looked at him, her silver eyes wide with panic. "Kale." Lyra paused, her attention snapping back to Kale. "You defend anomaly, flawed copy." "She saved my arm," Kale shot back, moving to stand protectively near Echo again. "She helped fix the beacon. She's not just data, Lyra, she thinks, she feels." "She mimics," Lyra countered, frustration coloring her tone. "She reflects my connection to you. It is Echo, nothing more." "No," Echo cried out, her voice gaining surprising strength. "Feel different for Kale, not same as Prime." Lyra's light pulsed dangerously. "You dare!" She raised her hand, energy crackling around her luminous fingers aimed at Echo. "Stop!" Kale lunged, grabbing Lyra's wrist. The jolt of her energy, raw and uncontrolled, shot up his arm, making his teeth ache, but he held on. "Don't hurt her." Lyra tried to wrench her arm free, her eyes blazing silver fire. She destabilizes, she threatens the bond. Maybe the bond isn't what you think it is, Kale yelled, grappling with her, surprised by her strength. Maybe it's not just about you, his words struck home. Lyra froze, her light flickering, receding from blue fury to a shocked, wounded violet. She stared at him, searching his face, seeing not just defiance but something else, connection, yes, but not solely directed at her. Echo watched them, her light a trembling mix of fear and dawning hope. Lyra slowly pulled her wrist from Kale's grasp. Her gaze shifted between Kale and Echo, the harsh lines of command softening into something lost, confused. The fight seemed to drain out of her. "You prefer the copy," she whispered, the translator barely catching the broken words. It wasn't accusation but genuine disbelief laced with pain. Kale hesitated. Prefer? It wasn't that simple. Lyra was power, intensity, a whirlwind of sensation. Echo was quieter, deeper, a nascent soul he felt inexplicably drawn to protect, to know. "It's not about preference," he said, his voice gentler now. "It's about recognizing she's real. She deserves a chance, not reintegration." Lyra looked at Echo, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time, not as a backup or a glitch, but as a separate entity reflecting a distorted version of her own desires back at her. The violet light softened further, swirling with troubled indigo. She turned away from both of them, gliding back towards the command throne, her luminous form seeming to shrink slightly. She sank into the chair, her light dimming until she was barely more than a silhouette against the stardusted viewport. The immediate threat had passed, but the emotional fallout lay heavy in the air. Echo slowly approached Kale, her light still trembling but warming towards Rose. She tentatively reached out, her fingers brushing his arm near where she'd healed him. The touch was light, hesitant, but filled with unspoken gratitude. He met her gaze, saw the depth of her relief, her fear, her hope. And in that moment a choice began to solidify in his own heart, less a decision made and more a truth acknowledged. He reached out, gently taking her hand. Her light flared, a soft, radiant rose gold, and a pure, clear, resonant chord hummed between them, different from Lyra's, quieter perhaps, but no less profound. It felt like the beginning of a different kind of bond, one built not on overwhelming force, but on mutual vulnerability and nascent trust. Lyra watched them from the throne, silent and shadowed, a solitary commander adrift in a sea of unforeseen complications. Kale knew with a certainty that settled deep in his gut that he couldn't let Lyra reintegrate Echo. Whatever happened next, Echo deserved to exist. He squeezed her hand gently, a silent promise before releasing it. Echo's light pulsed, a warm rose acknowledgement before she retreated slightly, giving him space but staying close. The bridge was quiet, save for the low hum of the barely functioning systems and the almost imperceptible resonance emanating from the two Zelothi. Lyra remained slumped in the command throne, her light a dim, mournful indigo. Kale walked over to her, stopping a respectful distance away. "Lyra," she didn't look at him, just continued staring out at the void. "Talk to me. What happens now? Did the beacon work?" After a long moment, the translator crackled. "Beacon transmitted, single burst, low power, probability of reception low." Her voice was flat, devoid of its usual command or emotion. "And if it is received?" Kale pressed. "Who comes? Your people, those Korlak slavers?" "Unknown," she replied tonelessly. "First responder protocol." "So we wait," he sighed. "And Echo?" Lyra finally turned her head, her silver eyes meeting his. The wounded look was still there, mixed with a weary resignation. "Contingency protocols overridden by Prime's proximity tolerance." She gestured vaguely towards Echo. "She remains." It wasn't forgiveness, not acceptance, but a statement of fact. Her own rules, perhaps her own connection to Kale, prevented her from simply erasing the clone now. Relief washed over Kale. "Good, that's good." He looked over at Echo, who offered a small, tentative pulse of white light. "So we work together, the three of us." Lyra looked from Kale to Echo and back again. A flicker of the old possessiveness sparked in her eyes, a brief flash of blue, but it quickly faded back to indigo. "Necessity," she conceded. "Survival." It was a start. Kale went back to the main console, checking power levels, running diagnostics. Lyra eventually rose from the throne, her movements stiff, and began coordinating shipwide sensor sweeps, her voice regaining some of its clipped efficiency. Echo monitored the environmental controls and power conduits, occasionally offering quiet suggestions that proved surprisingly insightful. A fragile, unspoken truce settled over them. The intense intimacy and overt conflict were replaced by a cautious cooperation, an awkward dance around the unresolved feelings that pulsed beneath the surface. Later, as Kale was trying to jury-rig a more stable connection for the comms panel, Lyra approached him. Her light was a neutral violet. "Kale," he looked up. "The bond with Echo, it feels different." It was a statement phrased as a question. He nodded slowly. "It is different." Lyra processed this, her light swirling thoughtfully. "My resonance sought dominance, control, connection through merging." She paused, searching for the right words. "Her resonance seeks harmony, understanding." Something like that, Kale admitted. It felt closer to the truth than anything he could have articulated. Lyra looked over at Echo, who was carefully adjusting atmospheric pressure, her light a calm white. "She learns," Lyra murmured almost to herself. "Adapts, evolves." There was a grudging respect in her tone, mixed with something akin to wonder. That night's cycle, exhaustion finally claimed Kale. He found a relatively clean corner, away from the sparking consoles, and slumped against the bulkhead, closing his eyes. He drifted in a light, uneasy sleep, filled with swirling lights and resonant hums. He woke sometime later to a gentle warmth. Opening his eyes, he saw Echo kneeling beside him. She wasn't touching him, but her hands hovered inches above his chest, radiating a soft, comforting rose-gold light. Her resonant hum was barely audible, a soothing vibration that seemed to ease the tension in his muscles. She saw he was awake and started to pull back, her light flickering nervously. "Sorry," the translator whispered. "You seemed stressed." Kale managed a small smile. "It's okay, it helps." He hesitated, then reached out, lightly touching her forearm. "Thank you, Echo." Her light flared, a brilliant, joyful rose washing over him. She didn't pull away this time. Her hum deepened, harmonizing with a feeling stirring within him, a sense of rightness, of peace he hadn't felt since, well, ever. He met her silver eyes, saw the nascent trust, the quiet affection, the spark of the individual soul looking back at him. He gently tightened his grip on her arm, drawing her slightly closer. She leaned in, resting her forehead lightly against his, mirroring Lyra's earlier gesture but with entirely different intent. No overwhelming data transfer, no possessive claim, just quiet presence, shared warmth, a silent acknowledgement of the connection forming between them. It was gentle, tentative, and felt more real, more profound than any forced resonance. In the dim light of the dying ship, it felt like hope. The waiting stretched into tedious cycles, marked only by the dimming emergency lights and the dwindling nutrient-paced supplies. The fragile truce held, born of necessity and a shared, uncertain future. Kale worked on reinforcing the hull near a micrometeoroid impact site. Lyra monitored the silent void for any sign of rescue or threat, and Echo proved surprisingly adept at optimizing the failing life support, stretching their breathable air. The dynamic between the two Zelothi remained complex. Lyra treated Echo with a detached, almost clinical distance, issuing orders curtly but no longer threatening reintegration. Echo, in turn, was respectful but no longer seemed afraid, carrying herself with a quiet confidence that grew daily. Her interactions with Kale, however, blossomed in the quiet moments. Shared tasks became opportunities for brief touches, exchanged smiles, quiet conversations through the translator. He learned about her processing, how she experienced sensations, how she was differentiating her own feelings from the residual imprint of Lyra. She described it as listening to two overlapping songs and slowly learning to pick out her own melody. Her light, once mostly white, now shifted through a range of softer hues: pale rose for happiness, soft violet for concentration, a gentle gold when she felt particularly connected to him. One cycle, while recalibrating a sensor relay together, Echo paused, her light a thoughtful violet. "Lyra feels loss," she stated quietly through the translator. "Not just ship, crew, but connection with you." Kale stopped working, surprised by her perception. "She's possessive," he said carefully. Echo tilted her head. "Zelothi bond is total, merging, sharing is difficult, especially for Prime." She touched the relay gently. "My bond with you different, not merging, harmonizing." She looked at him, her silver eyes earnest. Like two lights shining together, brighter but still separate, he understood. It was what he felt too, a connection that didn't demand surrender but invited partnership. Later, Cale found Lyra by the main viewport again, her light a deep, somber indigo. "Still nothing?" he asked, joining her. She shook her head, the movement barely perceptible. "The void is empty, or silent." She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Cale. If Korlak come, they will take us, all of us. Zalothi resonance is prize, human collateral." "We'll fight," he said grimly. "We have to." Lyra looked towards Echo, who was meticulously cleaning a dusty console nearby. "She is not warrior, her resonance is gentle, ill-suited for combat." "She's stronger than you think," Cale countered softly. "And smarter." Lyra followed his gaze, a complex emotion swirling in her light. "Perhaps." The attack, when it came, was brutally swift. No hails, no warnings. Proximity alarms shrieked just moments before the ship shuddered under weapons fire. Red alert klaxons blared, bathing the bridge in harsh, strobing light. "Korlak!" Lyra snapped, instantly shifting into command mode, her light flaring a sharp, focused blue. "Boarding parties imminent. Cale, seal the bridge access." Cale raced to the main door controls, slamming his hand on the emergency lockdown. Heavy metal doors hissed shut just as pounding began on the other side. Another blast rocked the ship, sending sparks showering from the ceiling. "They're cutting through," Echo cried out from a side console, her light flickering with alarm but holding steady. Lyra glided to the center of the bridge, her form blazing. Defensive posture, resonance shield activation. She focused her energy, projecting a shimmering blue field that momentarily solidified around them, absorbing some of the vibrational impact from the ongoing assault. But Cale could see her light dimming slightly with the effort. The Korlak were brutal and efficient slavers, known for overwhelming force. Suddenly, a section of the bulkhead exploded inwards in a shower of molten metal. 3 figures stormed through the breach, tall, insectoid beings clad in dark, scarred armor, carrying wicked-looking energy pikes. They moved with predatory speed, their multiple eyes scanning the bridge. Lyra met their charge, unleashing a focused blast of resonant energy that sent the lead Korlak staggering back, its armor smoking. But the other 2 pressed the attack, flanking her. Cale grabbed a heavy pipe wrench, his only weapon, and lunged, swinging wildly, trying to draw their attention. One Korlak swatted him aside contemptuously, sending him crashing into a console. Pain flared in his ribs. He looked up dazed just as the Korlak pinned Lyra against the wall with its energy pike, the weapon crackling dangerously close to her luminous form. She struggled, her blue light flickering under the weapon's dampening field. The third Korlak advanced on Echo, who stood frozen near her console, her light a terrified white. "No!" Cale yelled, trying to push himself up. Just as the Korlak raised its pike towards Echo, she did something unexpected. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and released her resonance. Not as a weapon like Lyra, but as a song. A wave of pure, complex harmony washed through the bridge, intricate, beautiful, and filled with such profound sorrow and desperate hope that it stopped everyone, even the Korlak, in their tracks. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, bypassing armor and alien physiology to resonate directly with whatever passed for emotion in the insectoid slavers. They flinched, lowering their weapons slightly, confusion warring with aggression on their alien faces. In that moment of hesitation, Lyra surged, knocking the pike aside and blasting her captor with point-blank resonant force. Cale scrambled up, grabbed the wrench, and slammed it into the back of the knee joint of the Korlak menacing Echo. It roared and stumbled. Echo opened her eyes, her light now a steady, determined rose gold, and added her focused resonance to Lyra, creating a dissonant, painful frequency that made the Korlak recoil, clutching their heads. Working together, their lights blending and pulsing in a strange, chaotic harmony, Lyra and Echo drove the slavers back towards the breach, their combined resonance a disorienting weapon. The Korlak, clearly unprepared for this kind of resistance, scrambled back through the hole they'd created. Lyra sealed the breach with a localized energy field just as the sounds of retreating engines echoed outside. Silence fell, broken only by their ragged breathing and the insistent blare of the klaxons, which Cale quickly silenced. Lyra leaned against the wall, her light dim and fluctuating. Echo rushed to her side, placing a hand on her arm, channeling a soft, steadying resonance. Lyra didn't pull away. Kale stared at them, bruised and aching but awed. Echo hadn't fought with force but with feeling. And Lyra had accepted her help. He looked at Echo, truly seeing her strength. "You saved us," he said, his voice hoarse. Echo looked up, her light warming as she met his gaze. "We saved each other." Lyra pushed herself upright, looking from Echo to Kale. The blue command light flickered, then softened, blending with violet and a touch of Echo's rose. "Harmony," she murmured, the translator relaying the single word, heavy with newfound meaning. They had survived together. The aftermath of the attack left the bridge a wreck, but the three occupants strangely united. The shared danger, the unexpected teamwork, had forged something new between them. While Kale worked on patching the hull breach more permanently, Lyra and Echo seemed to reach a silent accord. They moved around each other with a newfound ease, occasionally exchanging brief, resonant pulses, communication Kale couldn't decipher, but which seemed to signify understanding. Later, as Kale checked their dwindling supplies, Lyra approached him. Her light was a calm, steady violet. "Kale," she began, her translated voice softer than usual. "The Korlak will likely report this ship's location. Others may come, or my people. Either way, we can't stay here," Kale agreed. "My hopper, it's small, like I said, barely shielded, but it's our only way off this rock." Lyra nodded slowly. "Two Zelothi, one human, in a vessel designed for one, maybe two humans." She looked over at Echo, who was carefully sorting salvaged components. "It will be close." "We'll manage," Kale said firmly. He looked at Lyra, sensing a shift in her. The fierce possessiveness seemed tempered, replaced by a weary pragmatism, perhaps even acceptance. "Lyra, about choosing." Lyra held up a hand, stopping him. "Choices were made," she said, her silver eyes meeting his without rancor. "Resonance shifted, harmony found elsewhere." She glanced at Echo again, a complex emotion swirling in her light, not quite affection, but perhaps recognition. Kinship, maybe. "Her path is with you, it is clear." Kale felt a weight lift from his chest. "And your path?" Lyra looked out the viewport towards the vastness of space. "My path is high command, duty, rebuilding what was lost." Her gaze sharpened slightly. "If my people find us, I will return to them, fulfill my function." She looked back at Kale. "If not, I will find my own way." There was a finality in her tone, a letting go. It wasn't a rejection, but an acknowledgement of their divergent futures. Echo joined them, her light a soft rose. She looked between Kale and Lyra, sensing the shift. Lyra met Echo's gaze, and for the first time, Kale saw her offer a deliberate pulse of warm, golden light acceptance. Echo responded with her own gentle rose resonance, a silent acknowledgement. It took another cycle to transfer essential supplies and adaptable Zelothi tech components to Kale's small hopper, hidden camouflaged in the dense jungle growth a short hike from the wreck. The cramped cabin was going to be a challenge. As they prepared to leave the derelict cruiser for the last time, Kale paused at the ravaged bridge entrance. He looked back at the command throne, now dark and empty. Lyra and Echo stood beside him. Lyra placed a hand on the bulkhead, her light pulsing softly, a farewell to her lost ship, her lost crew. Echo reached out, briefly touching Lyra's arm, a gesture of shared understanding. Then they turned and walked towards the exit, leaving the silence and shadows behind. The hike to the hopper was mostly silent. When they reached the small, battered ship, Kale popped the cockpit hatch. Reality set in. It was tiny. On pilot's seat, one cramped passenger co-pilot seat behind it, and minimal cargo space now filled with supplies and alien tech. Lyra looked at the cramped interior, then at Echo, then at Kale. "A logistical challenge," she stated calmly. Kale ran a hand over the hopper's hull. "We'll make it work." Lyra nodded. "Echo requires less physical space, more adaptable form." She looked at Kale. "Pilot's seat requires focus. You." She then indicated the tight space behind the pilot's seat. "We will configure." The configuration involved Echo partially desolidifying, her luminous form flowing into the space behind Kale's seat, conforming around consoles and bulkheads, leaving just enough room for Lyra to wedge herself in beside her, their forms close but distinct. It was intimate, unavoidable proximity. As Kale settled into the pilot's seat, firing up the engines. He felt Echo's gentle resonance humming just behind him, a comforting presence. Lyra beside her was a pool of calm indigo light. He eased the hopper out of the dense jungle canopy, rising above the wreck of the Zylothi cruiser, a silent, ghostly monument below. He set a course for the nearest independent star system, a place where they could potentially disappear, refit, decide their next move. Hours later, cruising through the quiet of interstellar space, Lyra entered a low-energy regenerative state, her light dimming. Kale glanced back. Echo was awake, her rose-gold light soft in the dim cabin. She reached forward, her fingers gently brushing the back of his neck, just above his collar. The touch sent a familiar warmth through him, a quiet affirmation of their connection. "Okay," he murmured, keeping his eyes on the star charts. "Okay," her voice whispered back through the translator, filled with contentment. He reached back, finding her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Her light pulsed brightly, a silent expression of joy. They flew on through the darkness, three disparate souls crammed into a tiny ship, leaving behind a past of conflict and loss. Ahead lay uncertainty, potential danger, but also the promise of a new beginning. For Kale and Echo, it felt like coming home, not to a place, but to each other, their separate lights finding harmony in the vast, silent expanse. The future was unwritten, but they would face it together.